All right, hey everybody, TG here. Let's get this started. Was having some technical issues, so it took me a minute to get back into this thing. So let's dive into it. If nothing else, then we'll be able to see the recording of this. So, all right, the thing I've been writing about recently, because today is March 30th, and this was a couple days ago, is we're trying to figure out what this move in the market is up. So let's get over here to this. Let me kind of there you go. So I want to be looking at this for the S&P and seeing what is actually going to be happening because we've had a pretty good move up, and you can see that a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is such a good move. I mean, are we fixed? Are we going to new highs? Or all we need to do is kind of back and fill a little bit, and we'll keep going." I'm a little bit more concerned about that. So obviously, this has moved up quite a bit. It's gone up a little bit further than I've been expecting. I was really underestimated this, and I thought maybe it would go to about the daily 50, but it wanted to go well beyond that. In fact, it went so far beyond that, it basically hit the other side of the range right here at the daily third ATR. Now, it's still very overbought. I mean, it doesn't get much more overbought than something like this. We have not touched the hourly 50 the entire time. That that is a straight up move. And I think a lot of it has been basically short covering. I think that there was so much bearishness in through here. And of course, we had a lot of good news out there, or a lot of, I mean, not good, but like a lot of strong news for the downside, for the bearish side. And so I think that's what kind of happened. And we saw this thing just finally go straight up. As I said, further than I wanted. And then I was kind of thinking that right in through here, we were going to get price to come back down and test the, didn't do that either. So again, this thing just kind of went straight up. And yeah, now at this point, we're up here at the third ATR, and we have this gap between price and the daily 8 EMA. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, if you guys come over here to profitpilot.com and go back to services tomorrow, so Thursday, I'm going to be doing another free webinar. We're going to do it a little bit differently, less slides, more just charts and showing you guys what's up and what I see out there and what's going on, especially since we've had a lot of news. So come over here. You can sign up for it. As I said, it's free. So kind of just check in, tune in with that. I'll see you guys tomorrow on that one. All right. So what do we do about this? Well, this last move up, basically right here, was, some news about the Russia-Ukraine peace talks and ceasefire and resolution and stuff like that. So, jack the market up like that. But I'm a little concerned that might be one of those sell the news type situations. It could also be the blow off top for this short covering rally. And you can see we are actually starting to get outside of the third ATR on the hourly chart, which is different than what we've seen before. We've seen it just run the third ATR. Now we're actually outside of it. And again, we have not touched the hourly 50 this entire time. So the further it keeps going up, the more and more unsupported it becomes. And it's just a matter of time until this thing wants to pull back and roll over. Same thing over here, like I talked about before, we got the price coming up to the daily third ATR and a big gap off of the 8 EMA. So lots of stuff overbought. And then we have price up over a downtrending daily 50 with the Moxie indicator below 0. So again, according to my rules with the Moxie indicator, this is technically an inverse trampoline move. Price should not be over the 50 if the Moxie indicator is below 0. So I'm just basically expecting a pullback. Now the question is, and I think this is what everybody's wondering, or at least I know a lot of people are wondering this, I'm wondering it too, is will the pullback be into strength, or will the pullback kind of fizzle and keep going down? So if it is into strength, then we should see the price come down here someplace. I'd love to see it come into the daily 50 like this, and then we could see price continue up like that, and we could see it start to be bullish again. And we'll have to just see where it goes from there. Will it go up to a previous high? Will it roll over eventually? Like, we don't know. But the next step is we'll have to see if that pullback is into support. Or what it could do is we see price come down, maybe bounces up a little bit, and then we actually can keep going lower like that as it then breaks through the daily 50. So that's kind of, those are the two paths that I generally see it. But right now, I'm looking for the pullback, and then we're going to have to reassess once we get that pullback. Logan Ojoka, how you doing out there? Let's see. Yeah, 11%, 11 days. Yeah, prime rug pull zone. You nailed it. So yeah, quarter in, rebalancing, OpEx. I did actually in my newsletter, if you go back to profitpilot.com and a couple newsletters ago, there was what the title for one of them was, "Is it this obvious?" or something about being obvious. Is it that obvious? And talked about OpEx basically that there were so many people hedged to the downside that if it didn't go that direction, then they were going to have to unwind all those positions, which would have been bullish, basically OpEx and short squeeze and stuff. And we got that starting on that Wednesday with the FOMC. We got a quick little price test down here of the 15-minute 50, and it just sailed after that. So we got that. Let's see. All right, we got some other people chatting in here. Okay. Yeah. So Loco no Joco, it's been held up for the derivatives market. Yeah, it has plans for this. I'm aware of some of that stuff too. Again, quarterly rebalancing. The other thing you can talk about as far as quarterly rebalancing is window dressing. Think about hedge funds traders, big institutions. They want the numbers to look good at the end of the quarter so that they can show that they did good performance. And so when you see something like this and you just start moving up like that, they just want to keep it up there. So I wouldn't expect this to really start rolling over until after the quarter end, until those books, the first 3 months of the year are put aside, and then they can start all over again. So I wouldn't be surprised to be seeing this thing held up until this thing rolls over. All right, yeah, just so you guys know, we're getting some spam in the comments, so careful with that. We will not be spamming you about Ethereum or anything else like that. So if anything looks like really just sketchy, don't click on it. It's not us. You guys know who we are and pretty much what we're talking about and what we do. So careful. We've been having a lot of spammers out there. All right, then the other situation that I've been looking at for the Nasdaq, and I think the Nasdaq helps give us a little bit of clue as to what to expect. If you guys are familiar with some of my patterns, and you look at the daily chart on the Nasdaq, what do we have? We have a 50, 200, 50. So this pattern, it can be bullish, but what I'm looking for is we need a pullback. Basically the same thing. We need a pullback into the daily 50. Maybe the daily 21, we'll have to kind of see how that goes. But generally speaking, I look for price to cross the 50 and then pull back into the 50. So that is how on that time frame I can verify that we are in an uptrend. And right now, I look at this and say, we've had a move, but I'd like to see that pull back into support to see if it's going to then continue that uptrend. So I'm going to be waiting to really get bullish on this thing, or maybe not, because we have to see if price can actually come back down to the daily 50. If it can hold it, great. Now, but if it can't, then we move on. Let me just show you Chewy. This is an example that I've been using recently to talk about, kind of a bullish or bearish situation on these pullbacks. So if we look at Chewy, and notice it's very similar to the Nasdaq chart, right? We got the 50, 200, 50 maneuver. Same basic situation. And what you'll notice is with Chewy, it did this right here, pulled back exactly to the daily 50. That's what I'm looking for on the S&P. That's what I'm looking for on the Nasdaq. Now, the question is, once you get that pullback, is it going to be bullish? And if it is, then price will hold, and you'll see it start to move back up, and we'll get a move like that. And you can see we can start getting a move up like that. Now, where does that move go? Maybe just like Chewy, maybe that move goes up into resistance, and eventually it rolls over like that, and it actually starts a much bigger downtrend. That's a possibility. Now, let me show you kind of the other option. So right in through here, we can slide this over right there. So let me kind of zoom in a little bit so we can get a better picture. So if this is going to not be strong, you can see here's where price crossed over the 50, 200, and then came back down to the 50, and notice that it fell through the 50. So here's a situation where it pulled back, but the pullback wasn't into support. It just kept going down. And so that is the next thing that we need to be looking out for and watching is, hey, when price for the Nasdaq, for the S&P, pulls back into the daily 50, is it going to hold and be bullish, or is it going to fail and be bearish? And you can see here, generally speaking, you can see that on the hourly chart, price did not hold any of the moving averages. It did not hold the hourly 50. The Moxie price trigger was fired to the downside, and it just kept falling, falling, falling. And so that's why, for me at least, I'm saying I'm expecting to pull back, and then we're just going to have to wait and see what happens after that, because I don't know yet. We really just don't know if it's going to be into strength or not. Now, let me talk about the IWM real quick. And so some of the things I'm looking at, we got this move up. Okay, fine. Where is it going to go? Not sure, but same kind of deal. I would eventually be expecting, here's a move up. I want to see it pull back like this, and then we'll see if it can go up and if it's going to be bullish. So I would really love to see a price pull back into some support like that. Now, let me show you FSell, because this is another name that kind of shows you more of what I'm looking at. And you can see here, in a very similar fashion, kind of like related to the Nasdaq. Now, not that it's going to move like the Nasdaq or anything, but it's doing the same pattern. You can see there's a 50, 200, 50 maneuver starting to generally set up, right? And so what I would be looking for is I want to see if FSell comes back to the daily 50. Now, it can go below the daily 50. It can go right to the daily 50. We're not quite sure, but I am expecting FSell to pull back or fall to the daily 50. And once it gets there, then we're going to have to use the lower time frame to assess and see when it's finally done going down and actually wants to start moving up. Very similar to something like this. I want to see if it's going to hold any kind of moving averages and start that move up. Now, if it does, like come down like this, generally holds somewhere in here, and then it starts to move up, this could be a good mover. And I have a feeling that based on what I'm seeing with all this, since it has pretty good timing with the S&P and with the Nasdaq, that I have a feeling that when it pulls back into the daily 50, if it holds, so will the S&P, or vice versa. If the S&P holds, then so will FSell, and then we'll actually see a bullish run. So I am looking for some of these things to see if there's any confluence between all of these kind of sentiments. Now, let me show you Bloom Energy, kind of in the same area as FSell, and it's doing the same thing, but it's doing it in its different way. Now, you'll notice it's not quite as rigid or not quite as exact as FSell as far as the moving averages. You can see, here's the 50 getting rejected by the 200, and you can see it still has room to pull back to the 50. So that is something I would be expecting. For something like Bloom Energy and FSell, I would be looking to move back down to the daily 50. And what I'd be looking at here is we have price here on the hourly chart moving up, but notice that the Moxie indicator is pretty much flat. So that is a form of negative divergence. In fact, a few weeks ago, I was talking about this when it came to, I think, USO. And I think it was USO. It was oil related. And it pretty much nailed the pullback that was happening. Maybe it was XOP. I'll see if I can find that next. So I would be very aware that the Moxie indicator here has gone flat despite price trying to move up. We could also see that there was some divergence here. We had price moving up like that, and the Moxie indicator continues to move down. So these are the things that when I put the time frames together, I'm like, yep, this looks like it's about to do a pullback. The hourly chart is telling me that because of the Moxie indicator, and the daily chart is telling me that because of this, structure between the moving averages. All right, so FSell, Bloom Energy, moving very similarly to each other, I believe, and I'd be looking for a pullback. Let's see. Then we already know Amazon, Apple. Amazon looks very, very similar to the Nasdaq in the fact that it's doing a 50, 200, 50 maneuver. So, here's the 50, here's the 200. I would be expecting price to come back down somewhere near the 50, and then we'll have to see if that is going to do that. So that's what I would be looking for. And obviously, I think Amazon and the Nasdaq are going to be moving very similarly to each other. And then if we look at Apple, Apple's just super sky high. So how much further is this thing going to run? Well, I kind of think that this is about it. We are at the daily third ATR, which is a very high extension. And then you can see we are pretty much, well, let me see if I can get that a little bit better. Right and through there, we're pretty much at the previous all-time highs. And we are gapping off the 8 EMA. And again, we have not touched the hourly 50 since this thing took off. That is extremely, extremely unstable and unsupported, because it has not tested any moving averages. It's just gone straight up. So if you're long these things, great. I'd be cashing in, saying thank you to the market and doing that. And possibly, we might be looking for a short, because I think a pullback is kind of coming up. I don't know how much more these things have, but I'd be looking for a pullback on these things. All right. Loco no Joko, I know these scammers. So for you guys out there who are on my Instagram, or we don't have TikTok, but Twitter, anything else like that, just yeah, we're not going to be asking you guys for any money or anything else like that, or your credit card or your Bitcoin account. We're not going to be asking anything like that on any social medias. The only way that money will ever be exchanged is if you actually come to our website and purchase something on our website. So just be very careful about scammers. We get them all the time. We're trying to, it's like a game of whack-a-mole, and we're trying to get blue check marks on our stuff so that they can help, verify this. But it's rough out there. So sorry about the scammers. All right, AN. Gosh, there's another scammer. Okay. Um, so Yellowfin, AN, 15-minute 21 crossing the 50. So I'm looking at this, and for now, like, remember, I think that the market's going to be pulling back soon. I'm looking for the S&P to be pulling back at least to the daily 50, and you can see that AN has already started to roll over. So I would imagine this thing's going to generally kind of keep going that direction. Like, it's already pulled back to the daily 50. You can see that this was an inverse trampoline move, so price should not be over the 50 while the Moxie indicator is below 0. And so that was an inverse trampoline move, which was part of the reason why we took that trade short. So if we get a little bit of oomph with the market too, it seems to me like this thing is going to keep moving down a bit. So that is something that I would be looking for. I think what you were talking about was the 15-minute time frame. Here's something to note. Notice here how we had price move up over the 15-minute 50, but notice how it didn't hold it. It did not hold the 15-minute 50. Therefore, it was not support, and it didn't actually confirm anything. So nothing to do, at least on the long side, with AN. And I'm still looking at AN short because I think if the market can kind of give a little bit of nudge to the downside, then that should work out. The Venus, as far as BABA and far as the Chinese stocks, let me open this on a large. I'm still very hesitant to go after them, mostly just because it's China, it's a foreign country, and they have been in a downtrend. I'm not super interested in trying to be the first one in on something like this. The only thing I will say to the Chinese stocks is that the government came out and said, we're basically going to do QE. We're going to raise or lower interest rates, and we're going to be, I guess, pumping money into the economy or something like that. So they're doing what we do in America, to where we're trying to boost and prop up their stock market. Now, the other thing that I think was, from what I understand around this time, was not only that news came out, I think that they have lowered their, I don't know how you say it, they've lowered their resistance to allowing Chinese companies to open their books to American regulators, right? Wasn't that the whole thing about the Chinese companies, is that China didn't want the companies to open their books and see what they're doing and see their financials. But in order to be on the US stock market exchange, you have to prove and show certain things as far as your operations to make sure you're a real company and you're actually telling the truth as far as your numbers in order to be on the stock market. Well, China was putting pressure on those companies and saying, we don't want you to do that. And so a lot of people were concerned that the Chinese companies were going to be delisted. I think that's a fair concern. I mean, look how much these things have gone down. So I think my understanding is that they've kind of backed off on some of that pressure. And I think in addition to that, with the kind of quantitative easing, we're starting to see them move up. So, maybe you guys want to be looking into Chinese stocks. Okay, it's still not, because you can look FXE, you can still kind of look at this. It's still not quite the area that I want to be, looking at. So it's just not. I don't know. Maybe it's turned around a bit. You can see that there's a elf shoe right in through there. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, not my cup of tea. So we got Baba and Baidu, and I have seen that a lot of these things have tried to they turn around, and there might be something like DD. I'm seeing them turn around. They took that big dip the other week, and then they've turned around a bit. But I don't know. I'm just not something I want to be really diving into. So let's see, TWTR, Twitter, also trying to change. So this is good. This is what I'm talking about. We've been seeing a move up. We've seen the market move up, and we've seen a lot of names move up with it. And one of the things I want to talk about today, as far as notes, that the small caps have been starting to really move up in a fairly solid way. Mostly because I think they've just been beaten up so much that investors, larger funds, kind of look at this and say, well, the risk to reward is not very good on the short side anymore. These things have already moved down, they've already been repriced, and I don't. They're like, yeah, they're kind of get into deep value, right? I think Kathy Wood kind of used that word, that phrase a while ago. But yeah, deep value. They're getting so cheap that investors are just going to start coming into them because they're cheap, they're valuable, or they have better value, and they've been repriced. I mean, that's really what all this came down to, is because of interest rates going up and infinite PE and all that kind of stuff, that they just got repriced, and now they're at a more attractive level and a more attractive price, and they just don't want to go lower. And you can kind of see that with just price. You can see that it just started going lower until it popped. Now that's cool. I look at this as basically the first move. I see that they finally gotten off their low, and we now actually had a move to the upside. Some of the moving averages have crossed up. Price has crossed over the moving averages. This is good. There's a change. But just like the S&P and just like the Nasdaq, I want to see a pullback into strength, and I want to see that pullback hold some support. So for something like Twitter, great. There's been a first move. But what I'd like to see is a pullback into some sort of support, and I want to see it hold, and that would give me a more robust move or a more robust setup. Let me show you this. Part of my reason for saying that is if we look at the weekly time frame, this is not ready to go. This weekly time frame is not ready to go yet. This is, for those who know my pattern, here's the leg, here's the heel, and what is this? It's the arch of the foot, right? So if you guys know what I'm talking about here, it's to the arch of the foot. Therefore, I would expect price to pull back a little bit, retest the low area to get us the ball of the foot, and then we get the elf toe, assuming it's going to work. So this is the first move. I'm looking for the second move, which is a pullback into support, and to see if it's going to go up. So I'm seeing this across the board on a lot of things, and so that's why I'm just looking at this stuff. Hey, pull back, and then we'll get a move up. So Vesalios, if you can, you're seeing everything about my trading setup, so maybe you can ask a little bit more specific questions so I know how to answer that a little bit better. Let's see, oil. So we're talking USO, I assume. Well, my concern, if we look here, let's get the higher time frames. So my concern, where is, I have too many windows down here. There we go. So my concern with USO is it just seems a little bit overbought right now. And Loco no Joko, as far as oil goes, it's gonna keep getting news driven by the Russia-Ukraine thing. And of course, those kind of things can really make price go outside of normality. But I'm a little concerned, a little hesitant to be wanting to initiate trades here, as price is already outside of the weekly third ATR, and it is already outside of the monthly third ATR too. Now, of course, these things can keep going. We can keep getting news, news and stuff going on in the world can trump charts. Like, we get that. But yeah, it just makes me a little bit curious or caution. And if we look at the daily chart, we can see that there have been some pretty wild movements in through here. So you have to figure out if you can actually handle this stuff. The easier thing I could have said, and I did the other week, is clearly price was overbought up there. A lot of news, a lot of shock about Russia, Ukraine, all that kind of stuff. And you can just see that price really got outside of that third ATR. Really, really got outside. And it pulled back. But so far, it has actually been holding the daily 50. Will it continue? Maybe. Seems like it might be doing something like this to move up. I've been seeing that in some of the steels, like the metals and mining, that kind of area. So yeah, it can keep going higher. I'd love to see it kind of pull in a little bit. Flag. I want to see it come in off of those third ATRs. I want to see it rest a little bit. I want to see it digest this move. And of course, as I said, it's going to be news driven. So if it can kind of chill out for a little bit, then yes, I could see it going higher. But I don't really want to be seeing it go higher from here, because it's going to just make it really, really extreme and more unstable. All right, then let's see. If we look at coin, Bitcoin, GBTC, those kind of things, I'm still considering this stuff kind of the first move. So I'm going to get over to Bitcoin itself after this. Notice how the weekly chart looks a lot like Twitter. Funny enough, right? Not even related, but looks just like Twitter. In fact, a lot of stocks that really have gotten beat up over the last well, several months, are looking like this, to where they are finally coming off their lows. Okay, they finally reached the low and they bounced. But I consider that the first move. I consider that the bounce. Now what I'm looking for is I want to see this actually verify itself. So I want to see it pull back. I want to see it hold support, and then I want to see it move back up. Because what do we got? Leg, heel, arch of the foot, which generally means at some point I want to see price come back down, and then I want to see price move back up like that. So first move, I'm waiting for the second move. Let me show you what, let me just go through GBTC. I'm more familiar looking at GBTC, so that is the one I like to use. But you can see the same thing. The weekly 8 is still below the weekly 21 and still a fair amount below it. So oftentimes you can't just really see price kind of keep going up like that because, you know, the 8 is still below the 20. We're going to look for a pullback. And so I don't know how high price is going to go right now, but generally speaking, at some point, I'd like to see price come back down like this and then move up like that. And if we look at the daily chart, that also agrees with what I'm trying to say, is at some point, this is the first time that we've had price cross over the daily 50. And at some point, in order to verify strength and trend, you know, uptrend, I'd like to see price actually follow the 50 to the upside. And right now, it's not doing that. Right now, it is only over the daily 50, but it is not following the daily 50. So there's more work to be done. And that's why it's like, hey, this is great. You know, like good news. I'm happy. Okay, we got the market finally coming off the lows. We can do something about this. But do I want to go buy right now? No. I want to wait for a pullback. I want to wait for that opportunity that has price come into support to verify that this first move is actually legitimate. Because you could always get a move. Actually, let me show you. I think it was AG, just as an example. AG, just as an example. You know, here's gold, and look what happened here. You can see this is why I want to see the verification, because what happened here? We got price over the daily 50 and it ran into the 200, and what did it do? It fell below the daily 50. Like this is what I'm saying. I think we're kind of in this situation for a lot of stocks, and it would be great to see if the pullback into the 50 holds and we start to move up. But we need to be prepared that what if it doesn't? What if the pullback into potential support never actually stops and it just keeps dropping like that? That's actually what we got on the IWM, the small caps, when it had that failed breakout. The other thing is, notice here, this is exactly what I'm talking about with Twitter and with coin and Bitcoin. Notice that the weekly 8 is still below the 21. And so right now with a lot of these stocks, we're getting this move up here, but I want to see the pullback and see if it actually holds, or if the pullback fails and it keeps going lower. That's my point. We don't know yet. All I can say is I'm looking for a pullback. I think that's going to be showing up really soon. And then we're going to have to see if that pullback continues weakness or actually is strength, and then we can buy it. And that's where we're at. I don't know what your name is because it's in Chinese letters, but you're saying trembling move. I don't think I use trembling. I don't think I've ever used that word. So sorry if I can't answer. All right, guys, we got just a ton of spam out there. So yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to be wrapping up. It's been half an hour. We're going to have to start working on some of our security stuff now that we're out there a little bit more publicly and we get a lot of spam. So thanks for bearing with me on that. You know, as I said, I'm looking for a pullback. Let's see what happens when that pullback arrives. And let's see if it's into strength or weakness. And then we can reassess at that point. So thanks again, guys. Remember, I have a webinar, a free webinar tomorrow, 5 o'clock Pacific. And yeah, we'll just go through the markets and talk about a lot of news-based stuff and see what's going on out there and see if we can get the bigger themes. All right, guys. Thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.